Hello and welcome back to Coinscrum's Meet the Founders series. I'm thrilled to be joined today by Justin Banon, co-founder at Boson Protocol. Hi Justin, thanks for joining us.
Hi Paul, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, before we take a deeper dive into what you guys have been working on at Boson, we'd like to find out what our founders were doing before they entered the crazy world of crypto. Hear a bit about their background and kind of what got them into this space.
Sure. So I started out, I did a physics degree and somehow I ended up working for a company called Priority Pass, who was selling airport lounges as paper and plastic vouchers. And so I did a master's in digital pretty early. And I thought, what happens if we digitize these vouchers and instead of just airport lounges, do a whole host of different products and services? Well, that turned out to be a pretty good idea because I, as a sort of MD, I grew that business from 50 million to $1 billion turnover digital voucher platform. So, digitizing products and services and selling those vouchers. I then did a second master's in blockchain, and I thought, what happens if we put these products and services on the blockchain? And that really was the genesis of Boson Protocol.
Okay, and how did you come together? Why did you specifically decide to, as we come on to, the Boson Protocol is designed to, I guess, tackle the vertical of, well, as you say, the goal is to demonopolize commerce, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen a lot of people focusing purely on DeFi and decentralized markets from, I guess, demonopolizing traditional financial markets. You're taking quite a slightly different stance here. Why did you think this was the vertical in particular that you should be tackling?
Well, two things really. One is I had, experience of creating systems that represent real world products and services digitally. So that's good domain expertise. But really the sort of vision of the business is, as things stand at the moment, we're heading on a path where commerce will be owned by a very few sort of multi-trillionaires. And that's great for them, but it's not good for all of us. It's not good for all of the retailers and the firms, because essentially the whole infrastructure is gravitating towards the likes of Amazon, Alibaba, and all the value that's being created is just being sucked into making these incredibly rich people. And the vision for Boson Protocol is to create this foundational infrastructure upon which, instead of 2 trillionaires, we could have maybe thousands of millionaires and thousands of people opening and running commerce businesses that are profitable with a more equitable distribution of value.
Yeah, and if you're going to tackle that problem, what do you think, and I guess which fed into your design, what are the core pillars, I guess, that make up commerce in general, from end to end, from consumers to producers?
So the two fundamentally different things about Boson Protocol are, number one, we automate the coordination of transactions between buyer and seller. So putting commerce on blockchain is not, we're not the first to do that. That's platforms such as Open Bazaar have done that previously, but really just taking a platform business model and putting that onto a blockchain, and still using humans to manage any escrow or any dispute if as an option. The problem with that is, if you're still adding back humans, you've still got the friction, you've still got the cost. You're not getting massive efficiency gains, and then secondly, it's a platform business model, which is not, so you're using less performant technology to run the same business model. So the difference with Boson Protocol is that instead of having humans arbitrate disputes, and we use game theory. So we use a piece of game theory which I initially designed, but that's now been, and it is in the process of being revised and enhanced by some of the world's top game theorists and mechanism designers. So we've got Dr. Akaki Mamagaishvili from the ETH Zurich, who's a postdoc in sequential game theory, one of the world's experts, together with Dr. Zeynep Gertrude from Imperial College, who's a behavioral sort of crypto economics expert. And then we've actually also got a guy by the name of Aditya, who's one of our mechanism designers, who actually works on Ethereum too. So we've got one of the strongest teams in the world at designing game theoretic and behavioral mechanisms. And so we are basically automating that exchange between buyer and seller using incentives encoded within blockchain. So that's kind of one of the most disruptive elements.
Yeah. And I guess, if we're talking about, full world of commerce, and we're also talking about, physical goods, commerce in physical goods, but utilizing the efficiency, hopefully, of the blockchain, as you said, utilizing game theories to ensure that anyone using the system acts in good faith and is incentivized and motivated to act in good faith. And I guess that's always been a big challenge of what's on chain, how do you enforce good practice? Could you talk a little bit more how that works from the user's perspective, and if they were entering the system, and how they are motivated and incentivized in that way?
Sure. So the game inside Boson is what's called a kind of sequential game with commitment deposits. So it's the same. It's similar to the game that we play when we book an expensive restaurant. So when we book a cheap restaurant or an everyday restaurant, typically you're not asked to put a deposit down. If you don't show up, there are people that walk past and take the table. There's no loss on either side. But when you book an expensive restaurant, like a Nobu or something, then if you don't show up and you're a table of 7, the chances are they're going to have an empty table that could be quite expensive for the restaurant. So what the standard game is that the restaurant asks you to put a deposit, a non-refundable deposit for the table, and if you don't show, you lose that deposit. That probably doesn't cover the loss to the restaurant, but the restaurant knows it's going to reduce the number of times, the probability of someone not showing if they're going to lose $100. So that's an example of a game with one rule and one deposit. Our game has 2 deposits, one from the buyer, one for the seller. So the buyer, very much like the restaurant, has a deposit that's slashable, as we would say, or non-refundable in the event that the buyer doesn't show up. But then also the seller has a deposit as well, which is held as a commitment against the seller delivering the service and to an agreed upon level of quality. So buyer and seller make these commitments, and then depending on whether the buyer complains and the seller accepts that complaint, the deposits are returned in a way that incentivizes good behavior on both sides. Now, what we should also say is that it's not that we completely eliminate human intervention. The game can escalate to human dispute resolution. And in fact, that's a really important element of this, in that there are whole areas of misbehavior that are no longer viable because there's a human escalation point. So that really just makes it even tighter, that you actually just play fairly within the game.
Yeah. And you mentioned open bazaar earlier, which was, I think, we've seen quite a bit of that since the advent of Ethereum. I think in the earlier days of Bitcoin, people were inspired by similar ideas, but maybe the technology really wasn't up to scratch to be able to go a step further, especially programmatically, to deliver the outcomes that people might need, in real life. What do you think this has opened up for you, with Ethereum and other such smart contract-based systems?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the programmability is one. The fact also is that the business model of those platforms, I mean, one of the things I've kind of studied academically is, is this whole kind of business model innovation disruption. Often it's not, for platforms, it was not so much the tech, but the tech-enabled platform, a platform business model that was most disruptive. And likewise, what's so disruptive to platforms? I mean, platforms are like closed, economies, right? And so what the business model of Boson Protocol is to tokenize real world items as ERC20 tokens that can then plug into NFTs. So that you buy these ERC20 tokens, and these things can flow across DeFi. So instead of having to go to an Amazon and be in this closed environment to trade, you can buy these things using DeFi infrastructure. So you could have these ERC20s for a bicycle. For, let's say there was a green bicycle in particular, so you could have these ERC20s. They could be on balancer pools where they could have a bonding curve for price discovery. You could forward sell them even before the bike had been made. You could use it as a decentralized Kickstarter. You can use these things for collateral. You can transfer them using DeFi infrastructure. So it's really about the Ethereum ecosystem and DeFi that's been built upon Ethereum, enabling the financialization of these real world products and services, and turning them into a bit like commodities, right? So you can go and buy 10 tons of cocoa beans from the exchange in Beijing as some sort of digital, voucher, if you like, without ever having to take possession of those cocoa beans, and you can trade them and etc. And that's what Boson brings, and that open, and I think we've seen that with the economy at large, that having open liquid digital marketplaces is very disruptive to having closed controlled economies, and that's what will disrupt Web2 platforms.
So you're saying that you're using the idea of NFTs as commercial these are commitments, but effectively commercial contracts, which are obviously very easily tradable, transferable on a marketplace, which could be built on top of the Boson Protocol. Where are we at from a legal perspective in terms of a legal standing that such contracts can stand up on a legal basis in a court of law?
So that's a really, really good point. Apart from the game theory and the mechanism design at the heart, the other challenge is legality, and so that's another major project that we have. We have amongst the sort of 6 or 7 PhDs we have working at Boson, 2 of them are in the blockchain law and online dispute resolution, and governance area. So there's a huge amount of progress that has been made and that's being made for just aligning the obligations of parties with all of the various international rules on sort of consumer rights, etc. And so that's also a major area that is under development. The fact being that where there are gaps in the law, we will have to put some scaffolding in place, where we will have to have some entities that will have responsibility for curation and contracting with some like the big brands we're working with. We have to put entities in place there to do those bridges. But we're also at the forefront of also sort of the research and lobbying to ensure that we've got the legal connectors and on and off ramps to enable this whole new world of commerce.
Okay, and I guess on that point about dispute resolution, in a perfect world, everyone's acting honestly and transactions happen without dispute, and everything's settled as people would expect. But in the real world, as we all know, disputes do happen. What are when people are kind of contributing to this network without like a central organization, where are the opportunities for people to contribute and potentially benefit and earn rewards? Is that dispute resolution some open marketplace that anyone can join in on?
Yes, there is a number of areas. So if we talk about the sort of dispute resolution, then in quite a permissionless way, anyone can come and analyze the track record of buyer or seller addresses and choose to effectively sort of underwrite the cost of any future dispute resolution based upon their assessment of the probability of it occurring. So that's one area. But all across Boson Protocol, there are these opportunities to get involved and to share in the value that we create. So, for example, there is another sort of actor type called an aggregator who goes round and finds sellers and brings them onto the protocol. And if you find sellers that end up putting high quality products and services that sell at high quantity, then you will be in there early, and you will make a return on basically curating and bringing that to the network. So everything that we're doing is designed around incentivizing actors on the network to do the things that are going to benefit everyone, whether that's bringing supply or bringing demand or curating or sort of assessing the reputation of actors and covering for the cost of escalated arbitration. So lots of opportunities to learn.
Okay. And I guess one of the other core features or pillars around this, and as we've come to know, our data has been more and more abused by some of these large central organizations that you're aiming to disrupt. What's that going to look like on the Boson Protocol? What's the future for people's data and ownership of their data and control of their data?
Sure. So Boson Protocol will be integrating with Ocean Protocol, which will enable users to voluntarily share their data and for that data to then be accessible by third parties, but in a completely privacy-preserving, self-sovereign way. And those third parties through Ocean Protocol can then buy access to that data, which will give them important consumer insights. And that value gets returned to the Boson Protocol, and a proportion of that would then be shared with users that share that data. So, that's a model that, for example, Facebook could follow, right? All of the value that Facebook garners from your data and serving up ads, all of that good stuff. That value currently goes up to a very small number of shareholders. But the model with Boson Protocol is to then recirculate that value within our users and token holders.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I guess one of the perennial questions within blockchain, especially as we've seen an explosion of growth over the last couple of years in particular, is around scalability and delivering kind of a global kind of e-commerce marketplace is obviously going to require a lot of throughput, and ideally if it's mass adopted, then the network needs to be able to accommodate that scale. What's your current opinions on the scaling challenges? What networks are you building on top of, or before, or for rather? And are you planning for interoperability as different networks emerge that might become the leaders?
Yeah. So our overall philosophy there is quite a pragmatic one. I mean, we recognize that the history of technology, not all it's adopting these different scalability solutions, it may not be the best one is adopted, right? So we've seen that time and time again with QWERTY keyboards, VHS, etc. That it's there's this social coordination and then lock-in around a particular. So I think it would be a mistake to just think, okay, what's the best technology and let's go there, because we may be on an island on our own. For now, Ethereum is where all of our partners are and where we need to interoperate. But we also need a solution that's available right now, and I think Polygon is a very strong candidate, and also this the adoption and social coordination around Polygon is strong. So that's a really strong candidate, and it's not too big a technical bet. It's not too big a cost, and it's not too irreversible. So it's a sensible thing to adopt near term. However, I think it remains to be seen, A, what's the best solution in the medium term, and B, where do all the other projects go? because interoperability is absolutely key as well. Right? There's no point having performance on an empty network.
Yeah, absolutely. So where are you at in terms of development? I know that you recently, we'll come on to it in a minute and talk about your funding, your recent funding round. But where are you in terms of development of the protocol, in terms of partnerships, and in terms of like immediate near-term adoption?
Yeah. So we have the sort of public sale out the way, which is, you know, across the whole team an enormous relief. And we're just now we've spent some time just recruiting, training, and embedding people, and we're just all out building product across 3 or 4 verticals. We're building to give you a sneak preview here, you know, we're building a loyalty program, which is called Nifty Key, which is being built on Boson Protocol. So it's a kind of crypto native, crypto first loyalty program that's going to include huge amount of sort of crypto, metaverse, and real world benefits. We're also building out a project called Metamall, which is basically like a free port, which will be a trade and innovation area initially, will be in Decentraland, but then expanding to have a Metamall in every universe, every sort of world and every game, and which will connect in-world and in-game commerce, so you can buy one of our NFTs in-world, in-game, and you can redeem it in the real world. So we've got some huge announcements on that area, some incredible partnerships as well. So our first sort of phase of development is to really own this metaverse commerce, and from then, you know, that's our kind of beachhead strategy, and from then our breakout strategy is to then go beyond and extending from this sort of, you know, in-world to in-store commerce to a full decentralized commerce solution. And for that, you know, we will build a lot of the core components, but we will also, it will be an ecosystem play. So we're partnering with the Token Engineering Academy to fuse e-commerce experts with token engineers and mechanism designers to sort of discover and develop all of these modules that we'll need to replace the current Amazon, Shopify, Alibaba, all of these different modules, and also working with Outlier Ventures on an accelerator thread through the Basecamp accelerator for these decentralized commerce startups. So yeah, that's a kind of sneak preview of our strategy.
Okay, brilliant. And what does it take if people want to come in and start exploring what they can do with the protocol itself? People ready to come in and there are modules that people can start building and developing on right now, or is that a little bit further out?
Well, yeah, I mean, absolutely. Right now, the best way to get involved with that would be to join our ongoing Token Engineering Academy d-commerce workshops, and I will provide you with the link for that, and also join our Discord, where there are these ongoing conversations. So we're sort of gearing up things like our d-commerce kind of grant fund at the moment, but we've already made a number of grants, and we're actually closing a couple this week as well. So even before we've kind of formalized that, we're already sort of seeding the community with a number of projects that we'll be announcing it over the coming weeks. So yeah, we've, after the sale, we've sort of regrouped, and now we've just hit the afterburners on product and build.
Okay, great. So just looking a bit more broadly, just before we wrap up, the week that we're recording, or the day that we're recording this, has been a bit of a tumultuous week in the markets, but nothing we haven't seen before. But no one can deny the amount of extreme innovation we've seen emerge over the last year or so. More broadly on the industry in general, what's whether that's something which you think is relevant for Boson in particular, in order for you to fill your ultimate objectives down the line, or just more broadly in the DeFi sector in general, what's catching your eye the most and what's exciting you the most?
I think the most important thing is consumers, and we're seeing this continued disillusionment with big tech, and realizing that the myth of big tech and the sharing economy is actually a bit of a lie. Actually, it's an extraction farm designed by tech to just extract value from us all. And also that there's there is a better way, and that's Web3, right? Where we can all get to own and share in the value, own the networks we use, share in the value that they create. And so that's kind of, this kind of consumer paradigm shift. But, what we're seeing is this, first it was DeFi, then it was NFTs, and now the next zeitgeist is this whole metaverse. And, we're kind of a bit, wow, because we decided upon this metaverse commerce strategy a couple of months ago, and then suddenly it's as if, we're kind of swimming in this direction. There's this huge sort of swell of a wave kind of growing underneath us. And I think this whole notion of metaverse NFT is just bringing crypto mainstream in a way, because if you think about brands and music and art, those go directly to the people, and then there's a reason for people to engage in the technology rather than it just being cool tech. So I think mainstream is here. We're already seeing that kind of swell, and I think that's just going to rise into a bit of a monster wave. And so, yeah, the ups and downs of crypto volatility are always going to be there, but the major kind of swell we're seeing is mainstream adoption, and I think this is going to be a massive year for crypto.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, I guess that's the thing, isn't it? 99.9% of the world's population do engage in commerce. They're not all traders. They're not all speculators by default. And I guess up until now, a huge part of the market and engagement has been around speculation of these assets. And obviously, exploring what the technology can offer as well. But, I tend to agree with you, I think there's been a lot of focus on user experience around the NFT space, and seeing what we are seeing around the metaverse as well, which is especially for a certain demographic, certainly capturing their imagination. So I can definitely see how this is all coming together. I think there's huge amounts that you'll be having to get your teeth into in the coming years. It sounds fascinating what you've kind of developed so far, and in the process of still developing, Justin. So thank you for joining us and sharing your insights and explaining what you're doing. And hopefully some people watching can come to your website and find out more how they can get involved.
Brilliant. Thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me. It's been a blast.
Thank you.